After decades of double-digit economic growth, China is losing its momentum. Let's find out how the world's second largest economic powerhouse has lost its steam and where it should go from here on out. Let's take a look.
To evaluate a country's economic performance, we use these four performance criteria. Firstly, productivity and growth. Secondly, economic stability and security. Thirdly, efficiency. And lastly, personal freedom and equity.
So how is China faring? With double-digit growth over the past decades, material standards of living have risen exponentially, lifting millions out of poverty. China has since been known as the world's manufacturer, with an economy that relies heavily on heavy industrialization and exports. However, such growth comes at the expense of environmental degradation and social stability, the linchpin to government policies. With China's working age population shrinking more than 3 million annually, it is hard to maintain this level of economic growth. This has already manifested itself in a decrease in growth rates to 7%, and therefore, the government has to make policies to deal with the inevitable.
To examine whether China should pursue slower growth, we have to look at it from the policymakers' perspective. In general, policymakers have three goals: to keep the economy growing at a steady rate over time, limit unemployment, and keep prices stable. When the three are fulfilled, people are happy, and the government maintains its legitimacy. Now let's talk about legitimacy. The Chinese government's legitimacy is heavily based upon its economic status. This is a result of Deng Xiaoping's policies that emphasizes stable economic growth for the decades post-1978, when China first introduced the open door policy. Due to the explosive economic growth, the Chinese government enjoyed social stability and remained in power for a good period of time. With the inevitable slowing growth rate, data have to convince the citizens that pursuing slower growth is more beneficial for China in the long run, or risk losing its legitimacy.
Officials have likened economic growth to running a marathon. Having just started, China had sprinted, having high GDP growth to gain a good position in the race amongst other countries. But now it is time for China to slow down and pace itself before it tires itself out and hence adopt a slower growth rate. The government thus introduced the concept of a new normal of economic growth, which entails lower non-double-digit growth rate.
This phenomenon of slowing growth rate can be illustrated by the business cycle. Having such high economic growth, otherwise known as a boom, this will be followed by a slowdown in economic growth, otherwise known as a bust. China is the world's largest exporter of goods, such as steel and many other products.
In the past, when China was experiencing exponential economic growth, there was large demand for these goods from overseas consumers. However, in recent years, due to events such as the Eurozone recession, overseas consumers have reduced imports, and therefore China, facing this fall in demand, needs to lower its production of such goods.
Therefore, being unable to sustain fast economic growth for a multitude of reasons, coupled with the fact that in the coming period of growth, the cost at which fast economic growth rates come outweighs the benefits it reaps, China should pursue slower economic growth.
Tee hee!